place it in, and then we'll go. Okay, it is 5 o'clock. We'll call this meeting to order. First item is our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, our next item is the roll call of members. Jason, will you please take roll call?
Sarah Sarda.
Here.
Terry Crandall.
Here.
Kathy Greenaway.
Here.
Franny Kiefer.
Here.
Jill Sternquist.
Here.
Okay, as we do have a quorum, so we do have that determined. Move on to item number 2, the approval of the agenda before us.
Motion to approve the agenda before us.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please, Jason.
Greenaway.
Yes.
Kiefer.
Yes.
Crandall.
Yes.
Sternquist.
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Number 3, the approval of our minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes of our July 13th, 2020 regular school board meeting and those of the special July 16th, 2020 and July 28th special school board meetings.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please, Jason.
Greenaway.
Yes.
Crandall.
Yes.
Sternquist.
Yes.
Kiefer.
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Time to disclose our conflicts at this point in the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move on. The next item agenda is public comment. Jason, did we have anyone sign up for public comment?
No, we did not.
Okay. So this is the formal public comment where someone would sign up and then present to the board. We will allow some public comment when it comes to be talking about our opening a school plan, as long as it's just a part, it's specific to our opening a school plan. Next on the agenda is our consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please, Jason.
Sternquist.
Yes.
Kiefer.
Yes.
Greenaway.
Yes.
Crandall.
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Moving on to item number 7, good news and student achievement.
Good evening. It's hard to believe it, but we are finally back at it. And in fact, tomorrow at Yankton High School, we start our orientations for students. Tomorrow we're going to have the 9th graders coming to the high school to learn about high school, first of all, see what it's going to be like walking through the hallways, finding their lockers, but also learning what's different from past years because we have one-directional hallways, things like carrying their backpacks. They'll also be issued their textbooks tomorrow and learn information that's going to help them be successful at Yankton High School. Then on Wednesday, our seniors will come in the morning and our juniors will come in the afternoon. And on Thursday morning, we have our sophomores coming through, and we have 3 or 4 homerooms coming in at a time to meet with their homeroom teacher, and those are spaced out by an hour, although we've reserved an hour and a half for the 9th graders because there's a lot more information we have to go through. And so that'll give also students time to ask questions if they have any coming into the new school year, but we are really excited to be kicking off the 2020-21 school year and getting the students back into the building. Any questions for me? All right, Mr. Moores, you're up.
No matter who went first, Jennifer or myself, we would have had to make a huge microphone adjustment on who's raising it or lowering it. So the good news that I'm reporting tonight is about Yankton High School activities. So a week ago today, we were able to begin activities at Yankton High School. That included marching band camp, which took place all week last week, competitive cheer and dance practices started last Monday, girls tennis, and boys and girls soccer. So we made it through week 1 with all those activities, and they went really well. Coaches and students and athletes alike were excited to get back into doing what they love, so we were happy to be able to provide that opportunity for them. And then today, boys golf and football practices started. And then on Thursday of this week will be cross country and volleyball. And we will be off and running with all of our fall activities at Yankton High School. Questions for me? All right, thanks.
Hey, Ryan, I just have a quick comment.
You bet.
I just want to commend you for all of the work that you've done putting into the activity plans, and I know you're going to talk about another piece of that later on the agenda, but I think the reason it's gone so smoothly is because the work that you have put into this. So I really want to thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Item number 8, return to school. Wayne is going to talk us through a little bit of the plan. The plan has been, and the document has been on the website and for everyone to view, so he's not going to go through everything, but just kind of an overview for us.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I'm just going to briefly touch on 4 sections of the plan. All of the plan is really important, and I think depending upon who you are or how it affects you, I think each section just has different meaning to different people. But I want to point out, like I told the board earlier in this process and the admin team, it's a working document, and it will continue to be a working document after tonight, meaning that we will make changes ongoing as we need to, because things have changed actually significantly in the last couple of months in different areas that we've addressed. But I want to point out an example is section 1.1. If Nicole or Jason could pull that up. This actually came together today, and we have put together the Yankton School District COVID-19 Healthcare Advisory Committee. And you can see the members that are on that committee. We will have 4 physicians on there, one of which is a retired physician. Of course, Dr. Sternquist is on our board as well. We'll have Sarah Sarda on our board, Dr. Mike Pietla, Dr. Scott Hiltonen. And I want to point out that Dr. Hiltonen is not only at Avera Sacred Heart Hospital, but he's also the Yankton County Health Officer. And last year, when we were dealing with mumps, he, by law, is who we needed to work with as a school district regarding quarantine and those kinds of things. So it's good to have him on there. We also have Liz Healy, who's agreed to be on there. She deals with infectious disease at Avera Sacred Heart Hospital. I'll be on there, and Kathy Wagner will be on there from the district. If we get into a situation where we need to talk about possibly closing a school or maybe a classroom, perhaps a 4th grade classroom somewhere or some other scenario, I will also include that building principal to help us make that kind of decision. Once we've talked about the scenario and how we want to move forward, I will take that to the school board as an informational piece to let them know that we've met, and this is the direction that we're going to take, or I will take as superintendent. So everybody has agreed to be on the committee, and I just want to thank all of them. I know that they're not here, most of them are not here, but thank everybody that was willing to do that. I'd also like to go to section 1.9. And I'm not going to get into this too deeply, but section 1.9 deals with if we get a phone call, the school does, and a parent tells us that there's a confirmed case, their child has been tested and tested positive for COVID-19, or if the Department of Health contacts us and let us know that we have a confirmed case, this is the area that parents should really take a look at, because it lays out what we are going to do as a district and how that protocol works with the Department of Health. And I can't stress enough the fact that the Department of Health will really be walking us through this process in contact tracing and confirmation of any cases that we have within the school district. And again, I'm not going to go any further in depth with that, but I would encourage our parents and our school personnel to make sure that they take a good look at that section, because there's a lot of information there. Section 2, which follows this, talks about our academics. And I just want to remind people that we're going to start in what we call our level 1, which is in-school learning, and that's what the majority of our kids will be doing. Our plan on August 24th right now is to start school with all of our kids at school with their teachers. We have also offered e-learning under level 1, and those are for families that may not be comfortable sending their kids to school. And I could report to the board that as of today, we have 52 families, a total of 95 students. So if our enrollment is 2740, and that's what we're anticipating, right now it's about 3.5% of our enrollment. So about 96.5% of our kids and parents are choosing to be at school, but we have about 3.5% that are going to do the online. To break this down, excuse me, there are approximately 40 students in preschool through 5th grade, 22 students 6th through 8th, and about 31 at the high school. So if you really took, took a look at those numbers and looked at the number of sections of kids that we have across the district, it's a small number. And I know that there was a concern, I think, with some staff that they would have a lot of kids doing online, and at this point it doesn't look like that. I've checked with some of the other districts that are offering online, some of the larger schools, and if I understood them correctly, many of them are close to the 7 and 8% of their enrollment. So we're about half of what some of the other larger schools are. But of course, we've got a couple of weeks and that could certainly change.
Dr. Kindle,
Yes.
as part of that plan, you've got reentry dates for students that they can choose. Like for example, September, a student could choose to come in on the 8th or the 21st. Will they just show up in the classroom, or is there a formal process for them to come into the...
Nicole, do you want to address that? I've got a tickle in my throat. It's not COVID. It's just a tickle.
So there are staff, including myself, designated to help communicate with parents at each of the levels. So I'll be in charge of elementary, and any elementary students on our list for e-learning, I'll just help to stay in communication with parents, administrators, and classroom teachers. And then at those dates, we'll communicate prior to keep up to date, but at those dates, that's when they can come back into the school. And so I have it in mind, in my vision, that we would be able to contact and notify teachers at least the Wednesday prior to them returning to the classroom. Parents will need to decide if they're gonna come back that following Monday. So that will be a job that's designated to myself for elementary. Mr. D has a few staff members designated to help with that communication at middle school, and then Dr. Junkie does as well for high school. So it will be our job to make sure classroom teachers are well notified and principals of when those students will be returning.
And that plan will be consistent across buildings.
Correct.
Yeah, another thing I've got, will there be a notation in campus that you can look at a student's, like administrator or a counselor, look at a student in campus and know that that student is online or on campus as a way to tell them there?
Sure, so we have two processes set up for that. One, we have a Google Doc that will be a living document of all of the students that are participating in e-learning, their start date, their end date. And then also we have, I just lost it. Oh yeah, the code, thank you. In Infinite Campus, we added an attendance code to show that our students are present, but they're doing the e-learning.
Okay, thank you. And again, I want to commend who all put these plans together. It's a very, very thorough plan. And I commend you, Dr. Kendall, and everybody else who was involved in that plan. Thank you.
Nicole mentioned that I know there was a concern among teachers that, geez, how do we coordinate all this with all these kids that are going to do online? And I think as of tonight, you'll see that we do not have a lot of kids that are doing it. It's a small percentage, but again, that can grow. But Nicole, again, will help coordinate the elementary piece of this. And then Todd will have somebody assigned, Mr. Drachek will have somebody assigned at the middle school. And Dr. Jonke will have somebody assigned, I think, through your counseling department at the high school, and I'm not sure about Mr. D at this time. But the point is that all three of our levels will have somebody assigned that will help follow up with some of these kids that are doing online so we can keep them on track. Now they are not teaching it. That's the teacher's responsibility, and the teacher's responsibility to post the videos and the other work that they want done. But we will have somebody at each level that will help follow up with kids. And then I just want to mention that in this plan, we're still on the education piece of it. We also have a level 2, which is a hybrid learning model, which we could very quickly switch to an every other day. And that would mean that approximately half of the kids would attend school one day, half the next. We've talked about that. The building principals are working on how they will communicate that, and we'll have something out to the parents when school starts. And then the third option, of course, or the third level, is that we would not have school and we would be all online. I think it's important for everybody to know that the committee that we talked about just a little bit ago, they're going to help me with some of this in determining not only the scenarios of possibly closing a classroom or a building, but also take a look at perhaps when we might transition in and out of one of these models. And I would also say that we could go from everybody at school to nobody at school and not do the middle model. That is a potential that could happen. And then if we were out of school, we could transition to the level 2, which is every other day, and then back into level 1, if that makes sense. Okay, section 4.3 is the last section that I just want to make note of.
Dr. Kendall, a quick
Yes.
question on section 2. If we find ourselves in the hybrid or the all e-learning, how will activities be affected then? Are those two separate items, or will they kind of correlate together?
I'm sorry, Franny, I missed the last part.
If we find ourselves entering into a hybrid learning or an all e-learning, will activities also be affected? Say the marching band won't be having their practices or things like that. How will that be affected?
We haven't talked a lot about that.
And if you don't know, I completely...
Ryan, do you want to we've talked some about it, so I think we can partially answer that, yes.
Dr. Kendall's right. We haven't got into that entirely, but what I can tell you, obviously, is we're going to be taking the guidance and recommendation from the South Dakota High School Activities Association, as well as whatever the Department of Health tells us. So if we get to the point where we're not able to be in school, odds are we're also at the point where we have to put a hold on our activities as well. So that'll be a fluid discussion as the school situation evolves, and I believe activities will just follow right in line with that. So if that answers your question, Franny, it's not a definite answer, but obviously we're going to have to just be fluid as the school year progresses.
Nothing's definite.
Nope, that makes sense and kind of goes along with everything at case-by-case basis and address it when it happens. So thank you.
You bet.
Good question, thank you. And then the last section, section 4, is our mental wellness. And I just want to drop down to 4.3. And this has just come out with South Dakota Department of Social Services and the Department of Health and Lutheran Social Services and the 211 helpline. They have partnered and they're offering something called the 605 Strong program. And it's going to be a free resource that will offer listening and support to school district employees, children, and families regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think this is a really good effort on all of their part to assist us in our schools with these kinds of concerns. And so we've just added that today because it came out today. We got well, it actually came out a few days ago, but verification that we could certainly take a look at adding that into our plan. I'd also add that we've reached out to our school counselors. They will be meeting, and they're going to get some additional things out to all of our staff, because I know that was a concern that was brought up, that our staff had concerns about mental health, mental wellness kinds of things. And then we have our employee assistance program that we will make sure that we've got a lot of information out on that, and we actually do. So those are the areas that I just wanted to highlight. And again, everything in here is important. And thank you to the parents that have emailed, called, contacted us, given us good suggestions, positive comments, and just want to thank them for doing that.
Thank you, Wayne. Does the board have any questions for Wayne? I will open this up to public comment if anyone has any comment that they would like to add. All right, hearing none. This is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve the return to school plan.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please, Jason.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Sternquist, Kiefer,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. I know, Wayne, you had identified and called out about Ryan Moores, about what a great job he did, but I just want to thank the administration and everybody who's had a chance or who's been involved in this, because I know this is a real labor process, and it's clear that you've put a lot of thought into it and a lot of care for our students. As well as my fellow board members, I know that there has been many questions and diving into this on a level, so we had a comfort level of it too, and I appreciate everybody's work and diligence. We'll move on to item number 9, Yankton School District activities.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to go through what is the Yankton School District COVID-19 spectator plan. So board members, as I work through this, if there's any questions you may have or comments or suggestions, feel free to ask, and we'll work our way through this document. So a little background, over the past couple of months, literally, I've had numerous Zoom meetings with activities directors across the state of South Dakota at the AA level. And initially, there were 18 different ideas on how we were going to handle spectator attendance at our events. And I am glad to say, at the point we're at now, a lot of us are fairly close to being on the same page. So that's a good thing, because I think it's going to provide us some consistency as we move throughout the school year. But of course, everybody's got their own niche and their own nuance to their plan. So we'll walk through this. So obviously, when we put this plan together, we had 3 goals in mind, and these are the same 3 goals that I've been telling all of our parents at our parents' meetings that I've been attending. Number 1, we want to keep all of our students and coaches and advisors safe. Number 2, we want to be able to keep everyone in school as long as possible. That's obviously both students and staff. And then number 3, we want to give all of our students the possibility to participate in all their activities throughout the school year, since obviously that didn't happen last year. So in order to do that, we believe that limiting attendance is going to provide our students the best opportunity to be able to participate in all their activities throughout the school year. So kind of run through the plan and what we're thinking then. So we are going to say, since the school district has mandated masks in our schools, mask use is mandatory at all of our indoor events. And we will also have masks available for the public who come to the door and perhaps do not have one. They'll be able to purchase those for $1. At our outdoor activities, at this point, we're saying masks are highly recommended for all spectators. And again, that we'll have masks available at our gates if people want to purchase one or if they don't. And I am going to hesitate there and pause, because I would like you as a board to think about this for a second. We are mandating that our cheerleaders at football, for instance, wear a mask. And the reason for that is because respiratory droplets are how COVID-19 is most likely spread. And what is a cheerleader doing? they're yelling into our student section. And in turn, what is our student section doing? They're yelling back at our cheerleaders. So if we're protecting our 6 to 8 cheerleaders by having them wear masks so that they're not inhaling all those respiratory droplets, it might be prudent on our part to tell our student section that they also need to do the same thing. But our adults obviously will be sitting in a different fashion and cheering in a little bit different fashion than our student section. So that is something I'd like you to ponder here before we get too deep into the woods. Questions on
As you
that?
ponder that, as far as the student section is concerned, will there be social distancing involved there of any kind?
So here's, as I get deeper into the plans, what you'll see is we are going to allow all Yankton High School students to attend. So at a football game, for instance, we've got the entire East End grandstand down there where Dr. Jonke, Mr. Campbell, and myself can make sure that the kids are spread out as much as possible. At this point, Mr. Carr, our band director, is not planning to have the pep band play during games, which allows us to spread out even more. So the three of us will do our best to spread the kids apart. And then obviously at our indoor events, basically you're looking at volleyball games where we'd have a student section for the most part, and social distancing kids, from what we've discovered over the past several years at a volleyball game, is not overly difficult. So other than that, we don't particularly have a student section at our events except for the fact of football and volleyball. Of course, soccer, if you've been to a home soccer game, we avoid using the East End bleachers because it's kind of a firing range of soccer balls flying at you, so our kids would be mixed into the adult section there, if that answers your question, Terry.
Thank you.
Yep. Other questions about that? Okay, I'll keep working my way through the plan, and we can come back to that. So again, we're going to do our best to social distance our students. Adults obviously are going to have to social distance on their own. If you attended graduation, you saw that, how that works. So we're just going to leave that up to adults. Hopefully you're sitting next to your family. You obviously don't need to social distance from them, but we hope you stay far enough away from other people. We are going to have a reentry process because the process is going to call for vouchers to be used to get into the game, and I'll discuss that a little bit later. But if you want to re-enter, our ticket sellers are going to give you a wristband that allows you to get in. And if you're wondering why does a person have to re-enter, perhaps a person comes and watches the JV volleyball game, their daughter also plays on the varsity team, gives them a chance to run and grab a bite to eat and come back and get in. By having that wristband, that'll get them back into the event. We are still going to sell activity passes this year, but there's obviously a caveat to that. We don't know if we will or will not have 100% of our activities this year. We obviously hope we do, but you know, we hoped we did last year too, and that came to a screeching halt. So our prices will be the same as they always have been. Couples for $75, adult single for $50, and students for $20. However, and I'll get into this into the weeds of the plan a little bit later, we are only going to have high school students attend our events this year. When we get into the voucher system that I talk about, elementary and middle school students must attend with an adult who has a voucher. And I'll explain how the vouchers work in a little bit. So what we want everybody to know is if you buy an activity pass, it's non-refundable because we have no way of knowing if you attended 2 events, 10 events, 4 events, or whatever. So it's your option to buy a pass and utilize it like you have in the past, or to buy an individual ticket every time you come. But I would tell you, as I get into the plan here in a second, you're going to have to make a determination if it's worth your time and money to buy a pass because our spectators will be limited. We also need to know we've done a great job of making sure we include the senior citizens in our community at all of our activities, and we love the fact that so many people over the past several years have taken advantage of what we call our golden pass. That's where everybody 65 or older gets a pass and gets to get in free to the game. We will still allow a person with a golden pass to get in for free. However, they're going to have one of the vouchers that I talk about later. So if you don't have a specific voucher to get in, you will not be let into our games because you have to have that voucher. One thing we're also going to be doing, we think this is really important, since we're going to be limiting the number of people that can come into our events, the Yankton School District has decided to provide our web streaming this year free of charge. In the past, we've had that subscription-based. So a person would have to buy either a monthly subscription or an annual subscription to be able to watch the Yankton High School home activities online, and those are the events that occur in our main gym in the high school and also at Crane Youngworth. So we are taking care of that this year, waiving that subscription fee and providing free web streaming to everybody who wants to watch at Yankton High School. Speaking of Yankton High School, we've also had meetings with the city and school together administratively. We've collectively decided that we're going to close the Summit Center entrance this year. So if you typically entered for a volleyball game or any activity and you came in through the Summit Center entrance, that's no longer a viable entrance this year because we don't want spectators from in or out of town mixing with our people in the Summit Center. So please note that that's closed and it's emergency exit only. So that's where we're at with all the general guidelines. And obviously my plan with this is to revisit this after we finish the fall, but it's also at any point in time can be reevaluated depending on our fluid situation. So to get into the nuts and bolts of how this is going to work, you heard me talk about vouchers. So each rostered person, that's athlete, manager, statistician, cheerleader, and coach, is going to be given 6 event and date-specific vouchers to distribute as they wish. So any of those people on our roster are going to get a voucher to get into the game. That voucher in and of itself does not just get you into the game. That voucher allows you to buy a ticket to get into the game, or to use your activity pass if you purchase one, or to use your golden ticket, for example, for seniors. So you have to have one of those 6 vouchers to be able to get in. And that would be for the following activities: varsity football, varsity boys soccer, varsity girls soccer, varsity volleyball, JV volleyball, sophomore volleyball, freshman volleyball, competitive cheer and dance, and the Yankton High School play. So not only does that go for Yankton fans, but that same thing goes for the visitors who come to town. So if we are hosting Mitchell for our homecoming football game, which we are, whatever that magic number is from Yankton, if there's 80 people on our roster, like I mentioned, 80 times 6 is 480, so we'll have 480 vouchers that we give out to Yankton people via everybody I mentioned, and I will also mail 480 vouchers to Mitchell for them to use in the same exact fashion. So that way, both teams are getting an equal number of people there. You heard me talk about Yankton High School students earlier. So we are only allowing high school students into our game. So we are giving every high school student their student ID this year as soon as they come in for orientation, actually this week. The only way they can get into that game is to show their ID that says Yankton High School, and then we've also got stickers coming for activity passes. So if they buy an activity pass, there'll be a special little orange Bucky sticker on it, so you'll know if that person has an activity pass. If they don't have an activity pass, then they simply have to pay their $3 to get in. So again, elementary and middle school students, the only way they get in is on one of the 6 vouchers. So they may want to buy a pass if they have a sibling who participates in several activities, but again, they won't be able to get in on their own with that. And we are also doing the same thing with visiting high school students. So if we're playing Mitchell High School again for homecoming, a Mitchell student must show their Mitchell High School ID at our ticket seller, and then they can buy a ticket to get in. We agreed amongst the AAADs that we know we all have student IDs in our high school students, and we want our high school students to be an integral part of our activities. So we're obviously going to let them attend, but you have to present your student ID from your school. So at the Mitchell-Yankton football game, for a high school kid to get in, you got to have a Mitchell student ID or a Yankton High School ID. That's it. No high school students from anywhere else.
And a voucher.
And a voucher. No, not for high school, Terry. Your way to get in for high school is showing your student ID. Okay? Just the student
So
ID.
a Mitchell High School student could get in too.
Mitchell High School student will show their Mitchell High School student ID, then they have to buy a ticket and they get in. Simple as that. But if you're from Gayville or Vermilion or Freeman or Bon Homme and you don't have a Mitchell High School ID or a Yankton High School ID, you can't get in. All right, so those elementary, middle school students, if they use one of those 6 vouchers to get in, they have to sit with the adult that brought them in. They can't just go, we're not going to have a middle school section, and we're not going to have an elementary section. So if there are middle school or elementary kids at the game, that's fine, but they have to be seated with the adult who brought them in. If they don't cooperate, we'll have supervisors that take them back to the adult, and if that is not the case, if they can't stay put, then the adult and the student will be asked to either sit still or to leave, please.
Ryan?
Yes, Terry.
Will they be having their own voucher, or will they be coming in on the coattails of the parent or the guardian they're with? So
the 6 vouchers we give out for every person that I mentioned, it'll say Yankton versus Mitchell football, September 25th. whatever, the exact wording, then we've got some other little small wording on there. So what they need to do, so if there's if you've got mom, dad, middle school kid, elementary kid, that's 4, grandma and grandpa, that's six vouchers. You take those 6 vouchers to our ticket booth and you'll be able to get in, but we do expect you to stay with the group that you came in with. And obviously, we're not going to be able to mandate who uses those vouchers, so if family A only wants to use 4 of theirs and family B would like to have 2 more vouchers for an uncle or an aunt, they can work that out amongst themselves. But in order for you to get in, you have to present one of those vouchers at the door. And we will have them different colors every time, so it can't be repeated to somebody can go create a voucher because they think of what it might say. It'll be event specific, date specific, and color specific every event, so we've got it all figured out that way. We're also allowing Yankton School District staff members and their spouse, as well as board members and their spouses to get in. A lot of stuff that I just told you there. So the sports that we're not going to restrict attendance at are cross country, golf, tennis, freshman football, JV football, and JV soccer. Multiple reasons for that. A lot of those activities take place at a venue where we can't control entrance anyway, like out at the golf course, for example, or tennis courts. And the other ones, we think they are outside and there's plenty of space for people to spread out, so we don't need to require limiting our attendance at those places. Questions on any of the high school part of that? All right, last little part is middle school. We do have to limit middle school a little bit as well. If you've ever been to a middle school 7th or 8th grade volleyball game, you'll understand why here in a second. We have 4 games going on at the same time in middle school volleyball. We've got 2 games going on in the north gym. We've got 2 games going on in the south gym. We do not have room for unlimited spectators if we're going to try to do our best with social distancing. So what we're doing for middle school volleyball is each rostered person is going to get 2 event and date specific vouchers to distribute as they wish, and they'll use those. The middle school administration, Heather and Todd, will set up a table at the north entrance down there by the north gym. And obviously you don't have to pay a fee to get in for middle school activities, so you just have to give them the voucher and they let you in. And obviously we'll also give them a wristband if they need to run out to their vehicle as well. And that's only for 7th and 8th grade volleyball. And those will be event and date specific, like I said, and I will also be sending those to the visiting AD, send as many vouchers to them as that we give to our kids. And then as far as the middle school sports, we're not going to limit attendance, cross country, golf, and tennis, and then 7th and 8th grade football for all the reasons I said earlier with high school, because they're outdoors, their attendance is smaller, and some of those are impossible to limit attendance anyway. So thanks for listening to me go on. That was a lot of information. Questions for me on any of that, or reviewing of what you want to do with masks outdoors?
Does anyone have a question for Ryan?
No question, but, sorry, go ahead, Dr. Mask, I mean, I'm assuming, I feel strongly that I think if we're requiring our cheerleaders to wear them, and they're in close proximity with our high school students, I would be in favor of mandating masks for the high school students at events as well. Thoughts from other board members?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, we will adjust our wording on there. We'll say that masks are highly recommended for adults at our outdoor events, and masks are mandatory for our high school student sections, plural, both home and away, at outdoor events. And obviously, everybody indoors is required to wear a mask. Okay, thank you for feedback and clarification on that.
Any other questions? All right, this is an action item, so I entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the Yankton School District Spectator Plan as presented, with the addition of mandatory masks for high school student sections at outdoor events.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Jason, roll call, please.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
and Sarda.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item number 10 on our agenda, school district budget. Jason, will you walk us through this?
Okay, I will absolutely do that. So I've called up on the screen items on the agenda tonight for 10 and 11, of course, go together. So we'll start with 10 and work our way down here, and I'll answer any questions and, as each part comes up. The first section on the budget, and this is the format that you saw at the July school board meeting where we conducted our annual hearing, breaks out our expected or proposed budget by fund, or by operating fund, and those major fund types, general fund, capital outlay, special education, impact aid, food service, and concessions. So those are the funds broke down, and the appropriation totals moving down the left-hand side are by the functional areas. So looking at the general fund column, we break down by elementary areas, middle school instruction, high school instruction, summer programs, so on. So this first group is instructional areas of the budget. The second tier, support services, and that includes a lot of different things, all the way from interpretation services through guidance, speech. Well, speech would be a special ed expense, but improvement of instruction. You can read all the subtotals here, including the school board function, elections, legal, audit, all the way down through the third tier of non-program charges. And the non-program charges that apply to this budget are the early retirement incentive program. And the last section of the budget is our special programs for federal spending. What's different between the July budget and now, we have received the application and received confirmation of our ESSER funds, which is part of the CARES Act, and that was just shy of $500,000. So $484,066 is the Yankton School District allocation. It spans a very, very broad area, or very broad spectrum of eligible expenses. So Kathy Wagner and I did that application, and it's going to be a very moving target as we work through our needs in the school district and identify specifically what to do with those funds. But I can tell you very broadly, what we've done thus far is a lot of our PP&E stuff, purchases throughout the schools, a lot of our preparation of purchasing equipment and sanitation types of cleaning chemicals have been utilized through ESSER funds. We've also budgeted to hire additional paraprofessional staff to assist in the classrooms this fall. And we're through this point, we've allocated just under 400,000 of that 484. And that is no way to say that all of that we've allocated is to be spent. It's just we had to start someplace in estimating the needs of the school. So now as we get into the school year, I'll be providing periodic expenditure reports to Dr. Kendall and to Kathy, and we'll evaluate, where do we go from here with that spending, and what are our needs and most pressing things that we need to do and consider as we move forward. So that does represent, a pretty big swing in our expenditure budget from what you saw in July to what you see now. However, it's offset as federal money, so there's also a corresponding appropriations on the revenue side. So that in total for general fund would bring our proposed budget to $20,958,281 in the general fund. And then that goes along also with all of our traditional federal programs that are noted here on the sheet. Moving across then to just highlight a couple of items with the other funds. Capital outlay, the proposed budget is $4.7 million. And this correlates then with the 5-year plan that the board considered and approved last month. And we are quite pleased with how we've been able to accommodate the needs of the schools and still keep our 5-year plan solvent. One item that is still up in the air, we have not yet received a notification that the GEAR money has been out, which is, GEAR is part of the CARES appropriations bill as well. And the difference between ESSER and GEAR, ESSER was award-based and it tied to the Title I funding formula. And that's how they determine the allocation amounts available to schools. The GEAR money, as we understand it, is going to be a competitive grant, and it's discretionary at the Department of Education and the governor's office. So we're not completely clear, what we might be able to apply for, but we're anticipating a lot of our technology needs to provide and deliver online instruction are going to be right up the alley of what GEAR money is intended to do. So we have earmarked a lot of purchasing and a lot of things that we've done this summer with the intent of going back and applying for the GEAR funding, which would then change our capital outlay. It actually would free up resources for us to consider doing other things potentially later this year, but we just can't say right now what that looks like or how much money we're going to get because it hasn't been released. So just know, traditionally, we bring amendments to the budget to the school board. When that does happen, we will most definitely apply for whatever fits in that program and then reconsider the capital outlay budget at that time. Then again, moving to the right, the special education fund has very much, I think this is verbatim what we presented in July, so just under $5 million. The impact aid fund annual allocation or appropriation through the monies that come from the Gavin's Point area, about $45,000 for our school and just over $2 million expenditure proposed for food service. And then concessions, just over $100,000. We do expect the concessions is going to probably look very different this year. We didn't get into a lot of detail with Ryan's reactivity plan here, but a lot of the concessions is going to be modified this year and probably have considerably less sales and consequently less expense. We'll have less food expense. So by the time all is said and done, I don't think we'll come anywhere near $100,000 of expense, nor will we come near $100,000 of revenue. On the means of finance then, this is what things look like, same fund structure, moving down the columns, local sources, intermediate sources, state sources, federal sources. General fund, new this year for this budget, property tax opt-out, and what we're going to recommend to the school board, or are recommending to the school board, the amount that was authorized by vote in February is $1,850,000. What would be a recommendation to take the full amount of the opt-out this first year. We've got a very difficult task ahead of us, knowing for sure what we need or don't need coming into this next year, and knowing that the ESSER money does have a finite limit. So looking at the opt-out, Dr. Kendall and I have talked about this many times this summer, taking that into consideration with the state aid situation, and state aid is confirmed. We did get the 2% increase we were expecting. That first payment was delivered in July. And the way that the state aid formula generates or pays to the school, it's a calculated need, and then they determine the amount by school district, send out those calculations to the schools for the first half, which is a July through December calculation, divide it by 6 and send that to us in the form of a monthly check, or actually direct deposit. So I can confirm we did get 2%. We're anticipating 2% all year long. We have no reason to believe anything otherwise at this point. But even with 2% and our full property tax opt-out, everything we talked about in February and putting all the projections into a model, our recommendation right now is to go ahead and move forward with that opt-out amount, knowing full well that we will reevaluate that through the next budget cycle. There may be opportunity there for us to back it off in the future if we can, but there's just too many unknowns at this point in time. So the state sources, as you can see, the 9.3 million, again, it's hard to see that that's 2%. You'll have to take my word for it, but that is the calculation of 2% increase. And then all the federal programs, and again, highlighting that ESSER money. Again, you don't see gear money in this budget at this point, but once we do, we will redo this and make the appropriate amendments. The other highlights here in the general fund, you'll recall that we do have some transfers coming in from the capital outlay fund, so we'll have I think off the top of my head, it was $400,000 of planned transfers on balancing capital outlay, and then we have the sale of surplus property as well as for the student house, and that's, we don't know for sure what that house program is going to look like this year, but we're moving forward with that as our budget to start with. Then moving into capital outlay, all the other traditional local sources, property taxes. We have the clean diesel grant, which you approved, the propane provider tonight on the consent agenda, so that's the corresponding revenue for that propane pilot. Special education, the state aid formula for special ed was re-indexed this year. I believe that's an every third year process. So all of those calculations have been updated along with state aid, and I think that's really the highlights here. You can see the food service budget as well. So questions on the action the school board is asked to take is to consider the resolution to adopt the funds or the budgets by fund, by total expenditure. So that resolution is outlined and the totals are noted as far as board action would be concerned.
Thank you, Jason. Does the board have any questions for Jason?
Jason, could you explain the difference, the ESSER and the CARES again, please? I'm still trying to wrap my head around that.
Yep, it is a very confusing thing. So CARES is the federal legislation. ESSER is the specific, CARES is the act. ESSER is the form of funding within the act. So I have the acronym CARES there just to kind of associate that with the stimulus payments. But ESSER is one form of many that were embedded in the act. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then GEER, G-E-E-R, will be another form when that time comes that I'll present an amendment to the budget and we'll put in an application for that grant. But that too is a form of CARES money in a different form, you know, as a competitive grant as opposed to an allocated grant.
Okay, any other questions? All right, hearing none, this is an action item, so I will entertain a motion.
I move we adopt the 2021 school district budget as presented.
I'll second that.
Jason, are you okay with that, that action, or do we need to?
Yeah, I'll take the, if it's okay with you, Mr. Crandall, I'll take the action verbatim from the resolution printed on the agenda here to
That is
print in
perfectly
total.
fine with me.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please, Jason.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Item 11, authorized tax levy request.
Okay, so part 2 now is the traditional or annual action authorizing or designating me to act on your behalf to file the tax request. So what's printed on the agenda are the levies by fund or by operating area. And you'll see that's printed here by general fund requires the levies to be adopted by levy type or by levy amount. Other funds, such as the capital outlay, are required to be adopted in dollar amount. The opt-out is required to be adopted in dollar amount, and the special education fund is required to be adopted in levy. So just to make sure it's plenty confusing, you have a little bit of both, but it is laid out in the proper format, and the general fund levies, as said in statute through the 2% funding that the legislature approved in March, would be $1.443 per thousand for ag, 3.229 for owner occupied, and for commercial property would be $6.682 per thousand. That total would generate about $6.4 million for our general fund. And then the opt-out in the amount of $1,850,000. The levy rates are to be determined, and I'll explain how this works now, and we talked about this when we did our public presentations, but that levy, you take the dollar amount that the board authorizes in this action, and you spread it then amongst the taxpayer, the tax base as a whole. And the proportional levy rates between ag, owner-occupied, and commercial, and the amount of value that lies within each classification in our school district is how you determine the levy rates. So the estimates on that I have would be, I'm going to have to go off the top of my head here. I don't think I have, I think it was 41 cents on the on the agriculture, 91 cents on owner occupied, and I think it was $1.91 on commercial. I might be off a penny or two, but that's really close. So we don't have the ability to set that firmly. We make the request in dollars, the $1,850,000. That levy then becomes finalized after the equalization processes are complete and the state certifies the values back to Yankton County. Then the county auditor will determine the amount of the exact levy per classification and spread that on the tax bills that would go out in January for taxes payable in '21. And then as a further reminder, the tax bills that come out will be '21. That'll generate half of that $1,850,000 for our budget. So we have budgeted to receive approximately $925,000, what would be our fiscal '21, but it'd be taxes payable in calendar '21. So then that'll work that way for each of the next 3 years beyond this one. Your authorization in that opt-out is for up to 4 years total. At the end of the opt-out, that last year, in all likelihood, we'll have to have conversation about renewals, but the way that that would work in theory is that last half of the last year would be $925,000, and you probably recall that from the many meetings we had this last winter and school year. So any questions on levy rates? I do need to clarify, I guess, before I move on with capital outlay. Capital outlay being a dollar amount request as well. What you see there is $4,581,394. Back in 2016, with the rewrite of the current formula, everything went to, they basically froze the capital outlay, and then since that time, it's been a growth model based on dollar requests per year, allowance for a CPI increase, and then the growth of new construction in the school district comes back into that mechanism in the form of a dollar amount, so we can actually get an annual inflationary increase in capital outlay along with growth. So there will be an amended tax request for the September school board meeting because we don't have the growth values yet, and that's just a quirk in the system. That's just the timing mechanism of it. So tonight we'll file what we do know about capital outlay with the understanding there will be an amendment to the capital outlay tax request in September when I get the growth totals for the year.
Okay. Any other questions for Jason? All right, this is an action item, so we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the tax levy request as the recommended action outlines.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Number 12, our classified employee handbook.
I should have spaced these out on the agenda. I'm running out of breath. Okay, the classified handbook was last considered by the school board in December of 2018. And as we all know very well, I had drafted up some recommended changes for the start of the 1920 school year, but the data breach wiped it out. And we never made it back to revisiting some of those changes. And at the time, many were considered to be, well, we'll just hold on to them and do them all together then for the start of the 2021 school year. So I've been kind of waiting with this to make sure we get through COVID and reopening plans and making sure we understood if there are any needs along those lines that do affect handbooks, that we would bring it all together at once and get to the point then now that we're at is we're ready to move forward. None of our COVID plans really affect what you would find yourself putting into a handbook. So just a couple of really quick highlights about what we're recommending for changes are some of the time clock things. We just want to make sure that there's a clear understanding about when employees take scheduled lunch breaks to make sure they punch out and take their breaks away from their desk or workspace. That's a pretty straightforward thing to understand and follow. Clarification on time off requests for vacation. I think it's pretty clear how we've stated it, but just asking for a little bit more advance notice and making sure that we have things when it's adjoined to holidays, that there's at least more advance notice to help us facilitate scheduling and making sure we're all in communication of who's going to be here. And partial day requests, making sure they're at least 24 hours in advance. Then other highlights, everything's the same moving until we get to, I'll get there for a sec here. The work comp, making sure we clarify that work comp is not where you cannot use sick time to backfill with work comp. We changed our carrier about 2 years ago and have been working closely with them. That practice is actually very outdated, so we're just recommending that we bring that into alignment with current work comp practice. Not to say there isn't work comp, it just you can't supplement the workers' compensation benefits with sick leave. Also then on sick leave, a clarification about combination of hours worked may not exceed your scheduled work day. I think that usually goes without saying, but we wanted to clarify that if you're scheduled to work 8 hours, that the total of hours worked and what you put in for sick leave cannot exceed 8. And then lastly, the changes to the sick leave bank or the sick leave assistance plan. This does have some correlation to COVID in that making sure, we wanted to make sure that this is available to our staff should there be a need, and there'll be more details coming out here as we work through some of those procedures. But the sick leave bank for classified staff, when it was set up back in 2010, emulated what the teachers had available in the master contract, and that was done by design. The only difference is here, though, historically on number 5, I don't recall the details of why we did this way, but at the time we set it up to where the business manager was a committee of 1, and the sick leave assistance applications were submitted to myself. I would review them and then submit a recommendation to the superintendent and then ultimately on to the school board. And in light of managing this now for a number of years, we feel it's time for us to appropriate, or to appoint, I should say, a committee of other participating members similar to what's in the teacher master contract, and then allow those members some input as to the type of applications that we're going to be dealing with in sick bank. So that's what you see in number 5, and then also implementation of a waiting period on number 6. And this should have probably been put in the beginning, but when you have a bank, and it's a very large bank with a number of eligible people, people have a tendency when they buy insurance, they may need to buy the insurance anticipating they may have a claim. Well, in fairness to those that have been in the plan year in and year out, our recommendation is to put in a waiting period that you have to be a participating member for at least a year prior to making application to that common bank. And we did some research checking with other schools and other common sick bank types of applications, and that was pretty consistent that there's a waiting period for that. So that'll be our recommendation as well on number 6, to put that waiting period in. So those are the highlights for the classified plan, and I think everything else is basically restatements that I've already talked about here. So any questions from the school board about items that you see in there?
I'm not hearing any, Jason.
Okay, it is an action item if
Okay. Are you finished?
I am finished.
Okay.
The plan would be, if with your approval tonight, then we will get this disseminated just as quickly as we can here as school starts back up.
All right, as Jason said, this is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the classified employee handbook changes as presented to us.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. Number 13 on our agenda is standing committees, and I have had a chance to talk to all the board members, and I appreciate everyone's willingness to serve in almost any capacity. I did appoint on personnel and negotiations myself and Franny Kiefer, on finance Kathy Greenaway, and building and grounds Dr. Jill Sternquist and Terry Crandall. This is an action item, so I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to adopt the standing committees as listed.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Sternquist,
Yes.
Kiefer,
Yes.
Crandall,
Yes.
Greenaway,
Yes.
Sarda.
Yes. And our final agenda item is adjournment. May I entertain a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We are adjourned.